Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 82 of The Rewind. This is a show all about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the in-development, group-centric MMORPG by Visionary Realms. We keep you up to speed with the latest developments and discussions, so if that's what you're looking for, you're in the right place. This week, we'll talk about the latest VIP developer roundtable with my favorite lore master, J.N. Gerhardt. We see what the community thinks about day and night cycles in MMOs. And we get a little ethereal with some Gnome lore. So settle in and join me, Theric, and my whimsical co-host, Desrin, for this week's Rewind. So, Des, how are you doing, man? It's been a long week, and I am worn out. But what's going on with you?
Well, I'm a little worn in a different way. My throat. I have an occasional cough that, fortunately, you guys won't have to hear. But it's one of those annoying things. It's just persistent, man. Like I'll think I'm fine, and then I'll be like, ugh. And
yeah, no, that happens to me. That gets me on occasion too, especially when it's starting to get cold out here. So it's been like a little bit harsher in the mornings, but yeah, no, it's I'm worn out because I made a mistake. I volunteered for the Christmas party planning at my office, and I did it on the condition that I'm only in charge of the technical things. I'm like, don't make me come up with games. Don't make me come up with stupid little, we're gonna, questions and things to keep us occupied. I'm like, that's not my jam. I will make sure everybody's technically able to join a virtual meeting because that's what we're doing, like a virtual Christmas party sort of thing. Okay. Right. So I thought I was getting off easy, but what I forgot was that I work with people who have no comfort level with technology at all. People who are stuck in the late 90s, when it comes to like the level of technology that they're comfortable with. So my week has been trying to get people to understand how to, join a group, join a Teams group, because that's what we're using. And it's just like, it's so simple. Like it's so simple. And it's not though for some people. So I just, one of those things you have to take people, where they are, and the coworkers the people I work with they're not in the same realm when it comes to technological comfort. So it's draining.
Yeah, that's it is. It does remind me last year, my family, who I spoke last week on, as not really being particularly technically inclined, tried to do a virtual Zoom meeting for Christmas, I think. And it went as you would expect. I'm pretty sure my aunt doesn't actually know that when she's on a Zoom meeting, everything comes through the microphone. It was...
Man, I've seen more Zoom call craziness and like Teams meeting craziness, in the past 2 years, obviously, and I've seen things that I never thought I would see, and I'm like, people, there was one meeting we had where somebody thought if they just moved out of the camera's view, that turned their camera off. So they the direction was like, okay, everybody turn your cameras off because of whatever bandwidth and stuff like that. And so you just see this person slowly slide to the left and they're like, okay, my camera's off. Like, no,
oh my gosh,
no, it's not. Like that's the level that I'm working with here. Like that's sort of what I'm dealing with. So you can imagine it's a little
my
taxing.
Condolences. I definitely relate to that as my prior work history, but
yeah, but speaking of some people that aren't technologically challenged, let's talk about our adventuring party, because there's technologically savvy people who donated during the during the premiere last week. So these are our technological adventurers. First, we have Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric. We have Jason, as always, the Scar Beard Lord. And we have Ziplocks on the Dark Mer Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, and Bounty Code on the Human Wizard. So there's our party, and you'll see the graphic as always due to the help of Sparrow, our Elf Ranger, with that. So thank you, Sparrow. And thank you to everybody else who joins us each and every week, whether you donate or not. And the Rewind isn't a thing without a community. So we want to share it with you, and we appreciate your support. And like I said, if you want to join the adventuring party, you can do that. You can do it through the super chat function in the during the premiere on YouTube, or you can go to the Patreon page if you listen after the premiere or on audio only through our podcast platforms. And either way is fine. And yeah, so thank you to, as always, to everybody. We really appreciate it. And let's begin, shall we, Des?
Let's go.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, not a ton of news this week for our VR News and Notes segment. It's going to be a little abbreviated, but that's okay. We did get the December schedule for Pantheon updates from VR, which is always good to see, and kudos to Minus for getting that out to us. So here's what's on the December menu for Pantheon stuff. So the Dev Roundtable with Justin Gerhardt came out on December 3rd, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to recap some stuff. That was all about, obviously, lore and his writing. And then next week, Thursday, December 9th, is the next VR developer live stream. And it's described as being terrain and asset building in wild. It says terrain and asset building, comma, Wild's End, and a new dungeon. So it sounds like it's going to be a pretty big show. And Basgrim on Twitter actually asked a good question to clarify something about this live stream. He asked if this is the continuation or part 2 of the HDRP stream that we had a couple months ago. And Minus replied saying, no, it's not the part 2 of the stream, of the HDRP stream. He said this stream is going to be showing asset conversion, what it means for the future, and some terrain building, and of course the sweet new dungeon to look at. So that's super exciting. You know, it's not often that we get, we get to see like a new area. So that's
right. I like that we're gonna see something we saw not too long ago, which is Wild's End, which was in complete gray box, and we're going to see the next step, which we kind of saw with, the last HDRP stream for the, zones we've seen before. But this one is a lot more recent and fresh, and I'm pretty happy to look into it. Plus, I mean, the little screenshot that they threw in.
Yeah. It's looking good.
Are we going to talk about that? Because there's only so much you can, pull out of a partial screenshot of an obviously just like converted zone. Sure. But the thing that stuck out to me about it was the lighting being extremely natural, in spite of it being literally just flat. I mean, not flat terrain, but base terrain, like nothing. There's a few cliff elements that are put in there, there's a little pillar and such, but for the most part, the lighting, I can just tell already that the lighting is going to just change this game.
Lighting makes such a big difference in games, and I'm sure we'll talk about this after the dev stream quite a bit, because it's one of those things that just adds so much to the scene. Yeah, I'm excited for this too, and I think that the asset conversion that Minus mentions in his response to Basgrim there is pretty interesting, because that's what I always, that's what I talked about the last time during the HDRP stream, was like, how much of this is terrain? What are the other assets? And I think I want to know sort of like what else falls into that category, right? Like, I think this is going to be a little bit more to give us a broader, more all-encompassing sort of understanding of what's being converted and what the HDRP is. Even though this isn't part 2, sort of along those lines, what we can expect maybe.
Yeah, I like that, they are digging into this a little bit. I'm sure they're not going to show like the whole process of conversion itself, because that's really boring. But it would be kind of cool if they did like a before and after, like, hey, here's what the asset looked like before. Here's what it looks like in HDRP, to have a little bit of a comparison of like what to expect the new assets to look like. That would be pretty neat.
I could see them doing that. I could definitely see them doing that. And there's been past dev streams where they've done something like that. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it's
the
very
environment art stream, if I remember right.
Yes, that's right. I think you're right. Exactly what it was. So yeah, interesting stuff. And I'm assuming it's the gate that we're going to see because that's the one involved.
I was just going to talk about that because so Badscrim even said, looking forward to seeing the gate. And then Minus responds with, and a sweet look at a new dungeon.
Yeah, he didn't.
I don't want to extrapolate too much here or get any conspiracy theories going, but are we not? Do you think we might not be looking at the gate? We might be looking at something else.
I'm like Basgrim. I suspect it is going to be the gate, but then again, Minus neither confirmed nor denied that it would be. So it could be anything, you know.
You might be yanking our chain, but I'll hold out a little bit of hope that maybe we see something new. But I mean, I'd be happy to see the gate too.
But we haven't seen inside the gate though. That's the thing,
we just
right?
saw that really like gray box kind of distant. This is maybe the entrance or something. So
I'm thinking we're going inside. That's my thinking. But
that would be cool.
Yeah. Okay. Don't quote me though. Don't everybody get their hopes up and then come back and say Theric lied to us. So,
all right. I'll do that.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that's Thursday next week. And of course, Pantheon Plus you will follow that as we always do with me and Drac and Nathan Napalm to give our thoughts on what we saw. So you'll have that. And then on December 11th is the end of the year pre-alpha session that we talked about a couple episodes ago. So that's happening December 11th. And so if you are interested in being a part of that pre-alpha test, obviously get your pledge in at that level so you can partake. But then after that on the 17th is the next dev roundtable. And they don't tell who's going to be talking in that one, but we'll find out. And then the December newsletter comes out on December 23rd. So 2 days before Christmas. So little pre-Christmas gift to wrap up the year. I'm guessing we'll probably get lots of good information in that newsletter. They always tend to do, end of the year stuff gets, sort of a bigger presentation sometimes. So I'm looking forward to all this.
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun week, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about the roundtable that we just heard. It just came out on the 3rd, the one with JN. So I don't want to hit on all the little lore nuggets because I actually did a video that it'll be up by the time you hear this, going over all the lore stuff that was revealed. So what I've done is sort of talked about some of the areas that weren't lore nuggets, but more just game stuff, just general information that JN talked about. And one of the things that he mentioned was talking about like what styles of fantasy he doesn't want in Pantheon. What tropes does he try to avoid, or what sort of themes he tries to avoid? And I loved his answer because I've said this before, but on other I have some other conversation somewhere I said this, but I don't like steampunk things. I don't like combustion engines. And Jan said that's exactly what he doesn't really like that stuff in his fantasy world either. He feels like things like trains and engines and gunpowder and firearms and that kind of stuff sort of takes him out of it. So any sort of mechanical apparatuses fall into that category for him. Basically saying anything that's like too modern, to be believable in a high fantasy setting. And, a little later on, we're going to hear about the gnomes. And I think that you can probably connect those two things as to why the gnomes in Pantheon are so different. This probably has something to do with it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, because I immediately think to like gnomes in EverQuest or World of Warcraft, like goblins. They've got their all the like tinkery stuff, right? And I won't say I hated it or anything, but especially like the goblin stuff in WoW that was literally like cars and stuff. I'll admit, it's not my favorite thing. So hearing this was a really, I would even say a relief.
Me too. I just hope that they don't, get to I want them to be uber successful and get to the point where they have, on their 5th expansion. I just hope that 5th expansion doesn't end up being, Rise of the Machines or something like that, because that seems to be the way things go in MMOs sometimes. They run out of like high fantasy ideas and it gets to the mechanical stage of things eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the next part that he talked about, when something again we've spoken of, is how to get the lore out more methodically. Because Minus, has been a big advocate for getting the lore back in the newsletter, and that's what led to the bait being part of the 2 newsletters that it was part of. And I love this. And Minus and I have talked about this in the past about how that lore being in the newsletters was such a big draw to people. And Jan said something interesting. He said he was interested in ideas and how they can dispense the lore out into the world, and like also wanting to know what stories people are interested in, what types of stories, what type of lore, sort of gets you going. And so that's interesting. So if you're listening to this and like, you have some suggestions or ideas or thoughts on those questions, he's put it out there. So, you certainly can, go into the unofficial Discord or the official Discord if you're at the champion or VIP level and make your thoughts known. Just put it out in general chat about what you'd like to see, what stories would you be interested in, what ways can they get the lore out to us in a more methodical way. I'll say it again, the lore should be front facing on the website. I wish it was more so. And I'm sure that it'll get there, but, yeah. And then Ben also commented, he said, once they get closer to alpha, they want to really use the lore to infuse a little more soul into get that out there, the feel of the game for people, I guess. And there will be more opportunities for it then.
Yeah, I really liked that part, actually. Just it emphasizes that they're really, really wanting to go, big in alpha, right? Like that, it's kind of their chance. And since the story or the lore, I should say, is so great. I mean, like we've got such good story in Pantheon. I feel like it should be front and center. Like it would be a big draw. I mean, it's a big draw for me in the game. It's even a draw for people that I've, talked to Pantheon about that know less about the game, but they hear, some Chris Kane, lore bits, and they're like, whoa, I'm into this. And so I know I would like to see more character focused lore. I think that's what really gets me going, to tie me in, even if we're not talking about like a main story quest. I just mean like, here Arakamel and Bel Iris, getting together. And I was like, yes, like it was just such a big thing for me. If they bring it in Janice Sova for another thing, I'm going to freak out.
Yeah, I would love that. I think they do need to do that. And it doesn't, it doesn't, make me think that they're, it's not like a main story quest kind of thing. This is character development, and any good story, whether world story, lore story, singular story, needs character development, and these characters need to be developed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the point when they get to that point for so many reasons, obviously, but when they can start leaning into it a little more. So the next question was, somebody asked about like, what's the relationship between zone creation and lore creation? And this has been asked before, but it's a good reminder just about his process with regard to how Jan creates the lore. Talked about starting with sort of a footprint for an area, and that might be maybe some points of interest, or maybe there's like a big important NPC in the area. And unless there's like a hard requirement for an area, like there has to be a mid-level dungeon here, according to the design, Jan's pretty much free to write, the lore for the area as he comes up with it, as he imagines it. So, of course, there's collaboration with Jared Poulin, their concept artist, and other VR members for thoughts and ideas. But basically, they build it out from there. So pretty much standard, what you might expect in terms of the process. But that was interesting.
I mean, Jared is a lore writer himself, so
he is in that. Yeah. Yes, I thank you for reminding me.
Not to bring that down on you again.
I know what you're doing there.
No, I would love to be in a meeting between those two guys. Like, the stuff that they could come up with, I'm sure is really fantastic when they're working together.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I'd love to be in a meeting with them as well. And I mean, yes, I will definitely make sure I'm more aware of whose lore I'm reading in the future, because Jared's obviously a very impressive writer as well. So, and then the question was, how does the average player get the world lore? We've mentioned main story quests, and it's always one of those things with Pantheon, because they've talked about getting away from that mentality. So Jan talked about leaning into the environmental storytelling through like points of interest. He also said, how NPCs and mobs behave can tell a story. He used fractures, which are actually what used to be called atmospheres. It's part of their acclimation mechanic and system. So like, why is a certain area heated? Why is it anaerobic? That kind of thing. And then the last example was the harvesting materials. What harvesting materials are in a certain area can tell you something about the world, about the story. And it ultimately, it gives the story without asking people to read something if they don't want to, right? Like giving people walls of text is definitely a turnoff for some people. And ultimately, it's up to the player as to how much they want to learn. But if those triggers, if those cues and the information is there just organically in the world, then I think you take it in subconsciously without having to actively engage in it. I think that's probably a smart way to go about it. So like the perception system has been talked about, and it's very much a dependent system that's dependent on how much you want to engage with the world, right? And that's the path they're following. That's the trend. So I really enjoy that. And environmental storytelling is always something I enjoy in any game I'm playing. So I was encouraged to hear that.
This is probably like, I would say, the most important from like a game-wise perspective question of this DRT. And it makes me think of like the greats. I always have to think of like Bethesda games. I mean, like any Bethesda game pretty much is like, they are the king of environmental storytelling, because you'll go into an area in Fallout or Elder Scrolls game, and you don't even have to read anything. Like you'll just look around, and just how the props are placed, you'll make a story in your mind. And that is just so impressive. And literally my favorite part of playing those games is finding areas, and there are these little mini stories that you can kind of uncover through the environment. And man, I hope that is like a massive influence for them, because if they can play that out in an MMO setting, I'm not going to be pushing that max level. Like, like I'm going to be looking at everything, because that is what really makes me tick in games, man.
You mentioned Fallout, and I think that's the pinnacle, is the Fallout, the later games too, not the early isometric ones, although they did a little bit too, but Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and then Fallout 4. Man, when you go into a vault and you would like look and you would see like a skeleton like sitting on a chair with like a needle on the table beside them, and like a book talking about like, some sort of like, what they were reading right before the bombs went off, or before they, their vault was annihilated. And then you look in the corner and there's like a child's toy over there with like a crib or something, but there's nothing in there. It just, you come up with all these storylines in your head. Like, what was this person's last moments like? Love that. Yep. Love that so much.
Yeah. I always like kind of likened it to the Pompeii experience, where
Pompeii
you get this
exactly
like frozen in time moment that you come in after the fact, and you try to piece it together. Like if you guys can pull that off in VR, like, oh my gosh, this game's going to be next level.
If they pull that off, my wife is fanatical about Pompeii. She loves Pompeii. Anything she can find and read about Pompeii, she does. So maybe I can get her playing Pantheon, because I can tell her, hey, it's like Pompeii.
That's the end. That's the end, man.
That's right. That's right. Couple more things. A little bit of a somewhat bean by Ben Dean. He said there was some thought to adding more playable races, and it was being discussed in the dark corners of the VR offices. So it wasn't a confirmation, or it wasn't anything like we're adding more races, but he's saying the discussions have happened, and maybe something down the road. Who knows? Maybe they got something planned.
The beginning of the podcast, right? They're talking about barbarians.
Yeah, right.
And Ben makes a point to say, like, if you go to the website and click on races, there's no barbarians there. And and so who knows what the races could be, but I think the races we have are great. But I think races in expansions are like one of the best pieces of expansion content.
Yeah.
Because it brings back players, it makes people roll new characters. Like, there's so many benefits to it. I'm glad they're looking into it, but I hope it's like a, far future kind of thing.
Yeah. Probably. You know, it's funny you should mention that because at the time of recording, I think Final Fantasy 14, the expansion,
Yes.
Endwalker, right? That's what it's called.
Yep.
Just came out today, and I saw somebody tweeting. It's like they couldn't do something because there was too many people in. Like, I guess there's a new race in the expansion. I'm a total like Final Fantasy 14 noob, but I guess there's a new race you can play, and they said everybody was playing this new race. It was like a bunny festival, and there was too many people in bunny, the new race around this quest giver. They couldn't click on it. I thought that was pretty hilarious. So
yeah, that's what it creates, man. It's such a good opportunity, like just to bring people back and all that.
Yeah, and then lastly, just regarding player languages, Jan made an interesting point talking about developing new languages for anything is a pretty huge resource commitment, right? So they don't really want to do it in a way that's going to require a lot of resources. They want to do it in a way that they can introduce new player languages through words, phrases sprinkled in sort of throughout conversations with NPCs in the world. So you don't get a full treatment, but you still get some flavor. You get the feeling that there are other languages in the world. So that's kind of cool. And he's not saying they'll never have a fully fleshed out other language, but at least at this time, that's not something that they're working on. So
that's totally okay. Like I feel like having a brand new language is one thing, but I'm still holding out hope that they embrace like the EQ2 system, where I don't know if there was just one dev that did it or if they like hired out someone, but to create all the new fonts for the different races. And, certain languages would technically be in similar fonts and that kind of a deal. But, when you would speak that language, it would show up in that font, which was often, not legible if you're trying to read as if it was English. It's basically like creating a new language without actually having to create a new language. They're just replacing the characters. But like right. that I feel like is a really like efficient way to go about it while still giving that kind of world feeling of having languages. And it's something that I remember to this day about EQ2 that they did really well. So I would hope that maybe they'll follow suit with something like that if.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe. It's hard to say, but yeah, no, it's just sort of a good overview about some gameplay stuff from JN. So again, if you want more lore specific nuggets, check out the video that I put up there recapping it. Des, was there anything else in this roundtable that you wanted to mention, or anything else you piqued your interest?
No. This was great though, and you got to call out how much Ben and JN shouted out members of our community like Theric and Crowsinger and all. Yeah, obvious people to call out, but
it was pretty humbling. So I'm very much appreciative to get a little shout out here and there. That's super cool. But I'm just happy. I'm just always grateful that we have such an awesome team and that we're following and this game is in such good hands. So it's just, that's the main thing. And that's what I'm the most happy about. So yeah, go check it out. If you haven't heard it, the full DRT is posted on their YouTube channel and you can listen to it at your leisure. So in terms of Pantheon Plus update for this week, we are continuing our journey through Final Fantasy XIV on Tuesday nights for the Classes 101. So I imagine this coming Tuesday, it's going to be a pretty crazy, busy stream. We'll be seeing a lot of the new folks coming back for the expansion, so that'll be fun. And I wanted to give a shout out to members, Pantheon Plus members, Bounty Code and Sparrow, who are doing a D&D adventure with some friends over on the Weave and Void Twitch channel. And that's Nathan Napalm and some other folks. They had their first stream last week. It was a very good stream, very fun to watch. So go over there and check them out. They're all costumed up and you see their personalities come through, which is awesome.
I can't wait to watch that, actually. I admit, like, I wasn't able to be there live, and I'm kind of regretting it because I heard it was a really good time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't watch a lot of, like, live D&D on Twitch kind of thing, so it was sort of a new experience for me just in terms of, like, the format and the cadence of it. So I enjoyed it, and it's like I said, it's with some friends of ours, so it's always fun. Yeah, and then in terms of anything else, you'll see the weekly schedule on the screen here. It's got all our streaming schedule coming up. I'm just gonna I actually don't have it in front of me right now, Des. I'm gonna give the do a little cheat here and actually look in the Discord because I didn't have it in our notes. So yeah, you'll recall Monday night is Midnights with Drac doing EverQuest. I mentioned Tuesdays for 101, and then Crow Singer's got chapter 15 coming up on Wednesday on her ongoing saga. Crypt Fox is streaming Final Fantasy 14 on Wednesday night. We have, I said, the dev stream on Thursday, and then Pantheon Plus U follows that. I'm going to have a video hopefully up on Friday. I don't want to give too much away about it yet, but I'm aiming to have that done. Breakout streaming XCOM 2 on Friday night on Twitch on his channel. Wizen will have another piece of his fan fiction up on Saturday. And Redbeard Flynn has also got a video I didn't mention, but also on Friday that he's working on. So lots of good content coming our way, and hopefully you guys can check that out. But that's it for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right. So, community discussion this week. I was going to pick out, two threads that are going to be talking about day and night. And no, not the 2008 hip-hop hit by Kid Cudi. We're talking about day and night cycles and some features that go along with them. This actually, like I said, we had two threads here, which was really funny because they were started just after one another, one by StoneFish and one by Raidil. They both speak to potential of having like moon cycles, alternating brightness during nighttime and all this stuff. Raidil's thread goes into more about like the time for cycles. But I have to say StoneFish really won out with the title. All cats are gray in the dark.
He always has interesting titles for his posts. Like he's very, like it's very off the beaten path, but I love that kind of stuff.
It's really fantastic, honestly. I notice anything StoneFish writes has kind of a bit of a flair to it. Like I could probably pick out the text and be like, that's StoneFish anywhere on the forum without seeing
for
that.
Sure. I agree.
But yeah, so two threads. Kilson actually referenced one of them in a Twitter post, but like I said, we may as well combine them here because they're similar, right? But first off, let's do the basic thing. Let's talk about. I say basic, but you guys will see where this goes. Because I got a little bit obsessed getting onto this subject. But we'll talk about the timings first, and I'm going to rattle off a few bits of input here because, obviously we don't have time to go through everyone's full post, but gathering what the community kind of their desire for times actually kind of surprised me. I was expecting people to fall in line with the classic EQ timing, and turns out at least the people replying to this thread tend to want longer day and night cycles. So Ixar was the first to respond with a 90-minute cycle, which Siegfried also agreed with. And we have byproducts with two or more hours. Big Bad As 1 with 6 hours.
Oh my god.
Jothany with 2 to 3 hours. Goofy Warrior Guy with less than 3 hours at least, which is a funny way to put it. But just to make sure that players can experience a full day in a play session, which we'll be talking about that. Vandrad, we're starting to split this up now. So Vandrad with a 90-minute day and 90-minute night. Vjek with 90-minute day, 45-minute night, so like a shorter night. Then LaFale with 90 to 120 minutes per half. So that's 180 to 240 minutes total. That's like a lot of these are way longer than I was expecting. And this is where I got a little obsessed. I did some research here, and I wanted to see what different day-night cycles have been in various MMOs, because I've always fallen to the 72-minute cycle, I think that's because I have more of an EverQuest background, because EQ and EQ2 both did 72-minute cycles. And I always in my head, I'm like, well, that's nice. It kind of staggers, the day night, and probably if you're sitting down, you're going to be able to experience 72 minutes of gameplay, right? Like,
yeah, maybe.
But looking into it, this gets crazy. So Final Fantasy XIV lines up with EverQuest for the most part. It's about a 70-minute cycle. Then I was surprised to find Guild Wars 2 is 75 minutes in a day and 45 minutes at night, splitting it up. Lord of the Rings Online is 3 hours and 6 minutes for a cycle. And do you remember when we went back, like we had a lot of the Plus Guild, we were playing Lord of the Rings Online. And I remember being in a really long nighttime and kind of being like, man.
Yeah, I do remember that. I did notice it at the time. I remember thinking at the time, man, this is this is lasting a long time. Like, when is it going to be daytime again? Like, it felt, you feel it. You feel it when it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and then we've got like the modern, so New World is about 90 minutes. So it differs a little bit. But this I was actually so surprised about there. Because, I mean, I've played WoW. Like a pretty decent amount. And I never noticed this. So if people in the comments or at the premiere want to confirm this, but World of Warcraft has a 24-hour cycle that's set by server time.
Is that right?
Right.
Why is it so different from everybody else?
Exactly. Like,
is that the secret? Is that the secret of their success? is that what's made them so successful?
Judging by the forum posts that I was going through, it's actually a point of a lot of people's frustration, because I was seeing a lot of posts about people that, they log in the same time every night and it's always nighttime. And, and I was like, I'm trying to remember, because the World of Warcraft's day night didn't really stick out to me very much, I guess.
Huh.
Do you remember that? Like,
no, I mean, I'm barely a World, like I played it so little, so I wouldn't be in any way, shape, or form to be able to comment on that. But it's very interesting that, because that's exactly what would happen, if the server time was always synced up with your time locally, and you play at a certain time every day, you're never seeing the daytime.
Like, you'll never see the light of day.
Like, you're a creature of night because of where you live or something like that. It's kind of crazy to me, but
yeah, I mean, World of Warcraft, it has a very forgiving nighttime. It's quite bright. But yeah, that surprised me. Now, again, like I said, I got a little obsessed here, and so
I'm enjoying your obsession.
So Elder Scrolls Online, another game that I distinctly remember having, like, when is this night going to end experiences. Their cycle varies between 5 and 6 hours. Like, Elder Scrolls Online actually has like phases, like of
that's really interesting. I guess it's like, maybe they were trying to innovate on it. Maybe they were trying to come up with something other than what other games have done. I don't know.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, well, maybe Elder Scrolls was just trying to do something really, really neat. And it turns out they actually don't have an in-game calendar system as well, because a lot of events take place at certain times or, dates. So having a in-game calendar would technically throw that off.
Right.
But I was very surprised to see that they basically have seasons. I never noticed.
I didn't notice it either. No.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And on the note of, is this the first time that this has happened? I found out, and I believe this is the original Mortal Online. I don't know if the second one does this, but theirs was actually extremely accurate. This is of the MMOs that came to my mind, this was the most accurate representation of a cycle I've ever seen. So it's always 5 hours and 20 minutes, but they have full-on seasons where, like, the rotation is taking into account. So you actually will have, like, periods of the year that have longer nights and periods of the year that have full days.
Oh my God. Wow.
That's wild.
That is wild. Yeah, I'd love that. That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, so fresh as far as, really tying you to the world, I guess.
Yeah.
But and it has a funny little bit in the world of Mortal Online. It's called Knave. And the sun actually rises in the west, I found out.
Well, they're really just being different for the sake of being different there.
Well, right. I don't know if you remember in New World, I was freaking out because I was totally lost all the time. And it turns out in a lot of areas in New World, the sun like rises in the north or something like that. I think it really throws you off just to, push that feeling of like you're in the Bermuda Triangle kind of a thing.
You know what's strange about all this is that I can't say that I've ever thought about this I've never been in an MMO and thought, I wonder what their day-night cycle timing is. Like, this is so outside the way my brain works. I'm not like analyzing these little, like these aspects of the game like this. It's so fascinating. Even something like which direction the sun is rising or setting in, like I would never notice that. I would never notice that unless it was written in the lore somewhere, unless it was like a feature of the world that was like highlighted in the lore. Just if it's just happening, I've never noticed it.
Well, the really interesting thing about going through all of this is how little I noticed, because I've played most of these games. And I didn't, unless it was like hey, this night is like super long, I feel like I didn't notice so much. So my two sides, the devil angel on my shoulder, like one is saying like, this is super cool, super immersive. And the other is like, dude, you wouldn't even notice. You wouldn't even notice, man.
I know. I'm sure that there's some like, somebody in like resource management just heard me say that and is like, yeah, that's why we don't do it, because people don't notice the stuff, like it's not worth the time and effort to put into it. But on the other hand, the angel devil thing, it totally it is an angel devil thing, because I'm like, if I did know it and it was made a point of, I'd probably appreciate it. But
right, especially in Terminus, which is absolutely otherworldly.
Right, yeah, like it would be a feature. It could be something that I would, if I knew that was a feature of Terminus, then I would start connecting it to other things, right? And I would make it. How does that affect the world? What impact does it have on the residents of Terminus, right? And things that go on. So
yeah, and we'll get into the like seasonal things because we got 2 moons in Terminus, all that. So we'll get into that. But as far as the time, though, like I said, we've got a very wide spread here. I mean, we're talking 70 minutes to 24 hours of in-game time for a cycle, and the community is equally like kind of quite split in how long they would prefer a day to be. And so I found that so what Goofy Warrior guy was talking about with like players logging in at the same time each day, and like the day you would want to have it staggered so you avoid that, hey, I'm logging in every time and it's always nighttime, which apparently was a big complaint. And but
I would have a complaint with that. I would have a problem with that, because it's not just because of like, how the gameplay is different at night. Things just look better in the sunlight. Like graphics shine like, like you're talking about the lighting on just that one shot. What if you never got to see that lighting? Like what if it was always like moonlight is a thing? I get that. But like, I would want to see things during the day and I'm sure somebody out there is thinking like, what about like people with like seasonal affective disorder? Like, is it fair to bet that they have to always be at nighttime? Like the sunshine makes me happy. I want to be in the sunshine. Right. So
it is really, I didn't have notes on this. Someone in the thread mentioned how a lot of games keep nighttime extremely bright and just like tint it blue, Yeah,
that's true.
I think night is just a really hard thing to capture because how your eyes react to lack of light doesn't really match with how monitors work, with the exception of organic LEDs. Dude, I'm totally going way off track here, but
it's okay.
That's why all cats are gray at night.
Right.
Is because your eye actually perceives color differently when it's a low light situation. So trying to represent that in a game engine is pretty tough. But
big challenge.
As far as like timing though, maybe this is extremely interesting to me just because I've had to manage timelines for like game servers before.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've run servers for, like Minecraft, Ark. I've done 7 Days to Die, and probably more that I can't think of right now. But whenever I'm adjusting those settings, to customize the experience, one of the biggest things that people always like, poked me about was the day-night cycle. It was actually like, I mean, it totally depends on the game, but I found that was actually a really big deal for some people. And depending on what the game was kind of asking of the player, it would totally change like what they prefer as far as the cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that like the more cooperative or multiplayer the game was, the longer the cycle like that people would be comfortable with.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So like 7 Days to Die, for example, zombie survival game. It's kind of, you really just go out alone. If you go out with friends, it's, you can, but for the most part, you're kind of going and scavenging on your own. And nighttime, it has its dangers and stuff, but for the most part, it only takes about 10 minutes to kind of get loaded up if you go scavenging and come back. So people tended to prefer the night times to be about 10 minutes long.
Right.
I thought that was really kind of interesting how the gameplay always aligns with like what a player can accomplish in a time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that is interesting. I think that like to me, I'm thinking about Valheim, because in Valheim, I knew when it was going to get dark. As it was getting dark, I was always headed back to my house because I didn't want to be running around at dark, because at dark it's dangerous and it's just harder to see where you're going. And it's like, I don't know, there's a certain feel that Valheim has of, I mean, and they go for it. It's done on purpose, right? Where your home is safety, your home is warm, your home is dry, because it's going to rain and then you're wet, blah, blah, blah. Things that go along with that. And I think that you can really, you can really get it down to a granular level when you're adjusting the cycles of day and night to feed into that feeling, right? So, but in a game like that's a PvP game, like, whether it's whatever, you maybe night confers a better stealth, right? So you can sneak up and kill people easily, right? Like, if it's I don't know, I don't play a lot of those games, so I'm thinking like Rust or something, right? Like just heavy PvP stuff.
Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned Valheim, because that's a very atmospheric game, right? They really pushed that. And again, with Valheim, I always felt like I would go out, do my thing, and about the time that I would want to head back, it would be, sunset. And again, that just kind of aligns with the gameplay implications of the day. And there was always that fun choice at the end to be like, well, if I stay here, I have to like weather the night.
Yes, exactly. If you're gonna push it, you better be prepared to deal with the consequences of that. If you have like you've got a good iron node or something like that, and you're chipping away trying to load up, all your iron, everything you need to take back to your house. Can you push it into the night to max it out? And fill up your bags. Because, what if you run into, a troll on the way back, right? It's going to be much more difficult to avoid, for one, because you can't see it coming. And, if you die, in Valheim specifically, you better know where your corpse is, right? Like, you better remember where it is, because you're going to be looking for it for a while, especially if it's dark, right?
Yeah, and I mean, tying this back to Pantheon, a few people did point out how Joppa has, in a couple instances, indicated that nighttime would be different somehow. Like, don't want to get too crazy, but at least some kind of difficulty change would be present. And so going on that, I feel like it does align with what we're talking about with like Valheim. Like, will we want to have so much time that weathering the night actually is what would it be like? I don't want to. Like, it would basically be an exclusionary bit of gameplay, which would be more like the long cycles that people were suggesting. So, like, if the cycle is 6 hours, for example, that would mean a 3-hour night-ish, right? Depending on how they split it up. Like, if the nighttime actually presents a big enough challenge, would that be something like if you logged in and you have, like, let's say 2 hours to play, you log in as the sun's going down, is that going to like make you feel like, I don't really want to do this now. Like, I don't really want to play now. Right.
Yeah. See, it's funny. I've never had that. I've never had that in an MMO. I've never logged in and been like, it's nighttime, I'm out. I don't know. To me, the world is what it is. And I think you need to adjust to the world. So like, that's why I think the 24-hour thing that WoW did was kind of ridiculous. Like, that seems really stupid. Like, maybe you have to accept that not everybody wants to play at night all the time. So I just think that, you adjust to the game and you start to feel the cycle. You sort of get in tune with it as the more you play a game. And, for VR, what they've talked about with darkness being a more challenging time and nighttime being more challenging, I think there is sort of like there's a counterbalance. So if you're going to make night longer, maybe it's not as dangerous, or if you are going to make it super dangerous, I probably would make it a shorter period of time. Like, I would make it at like a 75-25 or maybe 60-40 balance a little bit. I don't think you go like, I don't think it becomes a 1-to-1 with day night sort of thing. I don't know, but I'm not a designer. I wonder if this is something that designers think about. I'm sure it is, right?
Oh, totally. But what you're saying, it's like the same thing I'm thinking as well, which is the duration of the cycle needs to somehow correlate to the difficulty that nighttime would bring, right? Or the challenge, not just like difficulty of monsters. Maybe they have, other things happen at night that just present some kind of additional challenge. It would have to be matched with how long the night is. Because if it is like 6 hours or something, or 12 hours, that's a repeating pattern. So it does mean that every time you log in at a certain time, it's always going to be that time of night or day or night in the game. So that's why the 72-minute or 70-minute-ish thing was come up, because that only repeats once every 20 days, or every 20 cycles, I should say. So you're never logging in at the same time, basically, in-game, even if it's the same time in real life. So it's all staggered. But the longer the duration, the less they can stagger that,
Right.
So
it's interesting stuff, man. Like, again, this is not my area at all. And there's a lot of math here that I probably, that is way like not in my comfort zone, but like, figuring out, the average cycle and who, how many players would play in that cycle and how often it repeats. Just as a gamer, just as somebody who experiences these things, I don't know. I mean, again, go back to Valheim. I feel like Valheim's balance was good. I liked the duration. I felt like it was a natural duration in that game. So whatever they use, maybe something to look at. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, as Dorothea points out, one thing that could actually be a frustrating factor, especially if the cycle is very long, would be if they add additional changes to the world that come with nighttime. For example, like NPCs only being, and people that have played other MMOs totally know what we're talking about with like an NPC might not be there unless it's like nighttime.
Yeah.
And, or a special vendor or something like that. So it's like, if I log in and it's daytime, I can't turn in my quest or something like that. Like, do you see that as...
That's a good thing, though.
Okay, again, you see that as a good thing. Got it.
That's a good thing, because then that forces you to, the world doesn't revolve around you. You have to come to the world. This is one of those things where it might seem like a player inconvenience or like a quality of life thing, but no, like, this is the thing that kills games, because they cater too much to people that like if it's a one-time thing, so you have to log in at, sometime you wouldn't usually log in, you will make plans to do that. It's a one-time thing, or maybe it's a 10-time thing. It's not going to be every time, but like a little inconvenience makes you appreciate it and engages you more. So I would be careful to smooth, to round that edge too much. I think that this is a good thing.
But again, that would have to be matched with like the duration of the cycle, right? Because if they implemented this and we followed that preference where it's like, it's okay to have stuff that's only here at a certain time, but if they had a long cycle and it was a recurring one where like, you log in at 6:00 and it's daytime and you play for 3 hours and it's still daytime, then you have to go to bed, Yeah, but and so next day it's the same thing and the same thing. So like, it's still, I think what I'm saying is like staggering it at least would still be beneficial in that way, right?
Well, you know what I would do then? I would be texting you at 2 a.m. saying, I know you're wide awake because you can't sleep. Go into the game, get this NPC for me, and meet me tomorrow when I can log in. Like, this is what I'm talking about. You gotta leverage your friends. This is a social game. If you are not available at that time, get your friends, get your guildmates to help you out with this.
I'll give you that because actually, someone in our guild was trying to log into Final Fantasy because they just dropped the expansion, so there's a huge queue, right?
Yeah.
And someone got kicked out of the queue, and my first thought was like, hey, if anyone needs to like stay logged in, like hook me up with like your Google Remote desktop, and I'll just like make sure your character keeps moving.
Jeez.
If you want, because like that's the default my brain goes to, but I realize that might not be everyone. Like, and not to mention the security side of that, but like,
sure.
I mean, it's not the regular thing because it's been so long since we had to do that. Yeah. But it sounds like you're really in favor of that kind of stuff, which is really interesting.
100%. Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's real quick, maybe touch on like brightness here, because that was another big part of this theme and something that is going to come up in this game one way or another. And so the first thing that kind of covers everything I'm going to start with, which is a post from VJEC pointing out that as long as there are things available to compensate for like extreme darkness, so we're talking like you literally cannot see, to kind of assuage those, like buffs or items or potions. So for VJEC, as long as those exist, VR can kind of do whatever they want, Yep.
Yeah. I think that, the darkness poses a challenge that it's just another environmental barrier that we can, as players, work to overcome.
I like that you said challenge there, because really it has to be a challenge. It can't just be an annoyance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
With just an annoyance, you can't just overcome it. It's just like you're just stuck. You just deal with the darkness.
That's true.
But I did find that most people in these threads really didn't seem to be a fan of extreme darkness, especially in like open air kind of places, so non-dungeons, while a lot of folks were okay with the darkness in the dungeons, because I think that's what they've talked about, mostly.
Yeah. Well, dungeons are supposed to feel dark. I mean, you think of a dungeon, you think darkness, right? I mean, you're talking about outside. Usually there's moonlight, there's, in our normal, in real life, I mean, there's always a street lamp around if you live in the city. We're not used to anything like that. So we've talked about this before a little bit, but I'm as long as there's ways to utilize folks and the enchanter again, when we saw the video with the enchanter and the light source on their shoulder, and I think being able to give that to other players is such a great idea, and it's going to be super useful. I support that.
Yeah, and that does kind of lead into a conversation that always happens, and I totally saw this in the thread, which was, well, hey, if it's dark, I'm just going to turn my gamma up. Like that's, I mean, that is the majority of people. I believe that, oh, I can't see, I'm going to turn my gamma up.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think VR should do anything to prevent that? Like it would be like black pixels, as they're called.
No, I don't think so. I don't know technologically enough about how that would be countered, but I mean, I just think that if your gameplay systems offer an opportunity to address it that way, that's what people, and it's an engaging system. People will not, just because turning the gamma up, just, it causes other issues. Like it washes out the picture completely, in a lot of ways, and it makes your viewing experience generally worse if you've got the gamma cranked up way high. So I think people will avoid that if possible.
Yeah, maybe I know a different crowd of gamers, because I think I've been experiencing most people when they reach that kind of adversity, even if the game gives ways around it. For example, since we were just talking about 7 Days to Die, again, it's a survival game, so not quite the same, but they have like torches, they've got flashlights, they've got all these things. I think they even have flares. That might be a mod, but they have all these things to kind of take care of darkness. No one uses them. No one uses them.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, because just as you would have to have someone carrying a torch in a dungeon in Pantheon, as we've seen in the past, right, there's a sacrifice that has to be made. Yeah. And who knows if the enchanter's light is some kind of trade-off. But it's like if there is a trade-off, people will rather not spend whatever the cost is. And even if it means making the picture look crappy. At least that's the people I know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think those are good differing perspectives there.
I will say, because I got to shout this out though, because I'm a fan of dark places. Mortal Online 2 actually has black pixels, as I mentioned before. I think it's like a shader of some kind, where if something is below a certain light threshold, it straight up will render blackness. So even if you turn the gamma up, it only brightens the non-black pixels. So you still have the same visibility, more or less, because the dungeons in Mortal are meant to be very immersive, I would say. And the interesting thing about this is I find myself not going places I shouldn't go in Mortal without way more people than I need, because you will straight up get jumped in that game by something like straight out of the darkness, and it's freaky, man. They have a spider cave where you will hear the spiders coming. Sorry for any arachnophobes, but you will hear them coming before you see them. And it is the freakiest, but also the best experience. And I'll admit, I kind of want that.
Yeah, there you go.
So
nice.
if VR, decided to try to prevent that kind of workaround, I think I'd be okay with it. But that's my personal opinion. A lot of other folks in the thread had their own ideas. So as usual, everyone, throw your thoughts in there. I have both of the threads linked in the description. So check those out, give your own thoughts, and we'll see what you guys think about day and night. But that's it for this week's community discussion.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. All right, new month, new story time. It's time that we actually learned about the enigmatic beings of Terminus known as the Gnomes. And these aren't your parents' gnomes earlier, parents' gnomes either, as Desiree mentioned earlier. These are not the bulbous-nosed, thin-hair, rounded spectacle gnomes that we've gotten used to. No, these gnomes are sort of an entirely different breed. And their story is one of the most interesting origin stories that we've been given. So let's start learning about their planet of Stormona and the circumstances that led them to Terminus, So without further delay, here's the words of J.N. Gerhardt, Pantheon's lead writer, as read by myself, as we hear the tale of the gnomes.
Alas, Stormona. This rare planet, known as a sun world, formed from the inside out. Her very mass was grafted together in a sphere around a thimble of a star named Elos, like a pearl gathering an oyster over itself. Though a handful of colder, distant stars shined upon Stormona, its outer crust endured under a shadowy veil of dimness, like a forgotten bride. For centuries, the gnomes toiled under the constant dusk of the far stars, surviving not by individual might, but a collective inertia that conquered challenges of every scale. Yet an ancient myth persisted amongst the race. It spoke of a moment occurring but once a generation, when the far stars would abandon Stormona briefly, and true night would fall upon their lands. In that sudden darkness, up through the very ground would whisper faint hues of light, the call of Elos, the one near star. A splinter of the native gnomes held on to the myth as truth, and on the long-awaited twilight they entered fissures in the metallic soil of the crust. Here they beheld the refracted flickers of radiant light, coming from deep beneath the surface of their dim planet. This discovery touched off the first rift in gnomon history, of which there are two. For by the time the travelers returned, the dusk light of the far stars had as well. The eldership of gnomes was sundered over their account of Elos' existence. This discord was evidenced by a single bright stone brought from the depths and presented to the council. For half their number, the stone was rebuked as ordinary and dead. For the remainder, however, it was hailed as glowing and alive, albeit faint. Thus, when for the first time in its history the eldership could not reach an accord, it was disbanded, permitting the growing number of gnomes to return to the search for Elos.
And that's the lore you know. And that wraps up another week and another episode 82 of The Rewind. I often think of like what this show's going to be like when Pantheon is live and launched and everything's in full swing and we're doing The Rewind. How great is that going to be, right? Like, how great is it going to be that we can actually talk about like our adventures and the things that we did that week and all the things that people are doing in the game, right? Like that's going to be fun, right?
I think it's going to be a lot harder. Jobs are going to be a lot harder keeping up with just how much the community is going to be doing because they already have so much going on. Like, we have the Pantheon Plus calendar, and I mean, that's just going to get so much crazy. We're going to have so many more content creators. We're going to have so many more like player events. It's going to be a blast, but it does make our job easier.
True. Yeah, I think it's going to be a whole new world when that happens. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. But until that time, I am sure glad that you are on the road with me here, headed towards alpha and then beta and then launch. So thanks to you as always. And thanks to everyone else for hanging out with us today. And as always, if you'd be so kind as to leave a like on the YouTube video or rating on your podcast platform of choice, it helps the show get discovered and brings new members to the community and to Pantheon and all that good stuff. So having said that, I will wish everyone... Oh, I want to mention one more thing before we go. I almost forgot. So next week, we are taking the week off. I have a work commitment party, as I mentioned in the beginning. Our work virtual Christmas party is at a time next week that is going to make recording difficult, so we're not going to do next week, but we will be back the following week with a big show, sort of a pre-Christmas show, and we will make up for it then. So mark your calendars, no rewind next week, but definitely back for the week of, I believe it's Sunday the 19th is the next show. So having said that, now we'll see everyone next time. Have a great week, everyone.
See y'all.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.